All right, so we're sitting here in Napier in Hawke's Bay with Jim Harré, who's one of the best-known figures in the New Zealand wine scene because he is a wine consultant and international wine judge, and also one of the gentlemen who picks out the wine for Air New Zealand. So, Jim, thanks for sitting down to talk with me.
Well, any opportunity to sit down with a glass of wine is always a welcome opportunity for me. So.
Now you know why I like him so much. So one of the things that I think is most interesting about Jim is that he actually wrote your PhD dissertation on the effects of altitude on the taste of wine, basically.
Right, it wasn't a PhD
Oh, pardon me.
dissertation. I'd have loved to have been. But yeah, so I did some research on what happens with wine and altitude, and basically, apart from the fact there's a little bit of a change in pressure, which creates a few issues with wine. Most of it takes place in terms of the person. So because you've got a relatively dry atmosphere on an aircraft, you end up having changes that take place in terms of your own body, and the wine that you drink doesn't actually change, but your perception to it changes dramatically. So one of the things that happens is that it's very low amount of humidity on an aircraft, so you tend to dry out, dehydrate slowly, particularly on a long haul flight. Acidity is king. I mean, acidity is wonderful. So the moment that you've got some acidity, which creates a bit of saliva in your mouth, juiciness, etc., you love it. It works absolutely brilliantly. The other thing that happens is that because it's so dry, you don't want big astringency characters coming through. So long chain tannins are what you look for. So soft, what we call soft and supple tannins so Pinot Noirs and things like that work incredibly well. That softer, sort of richer tannins.
And avoid maybe some of those old world, like a Bordeaux or something like that can be a little dusty on the tongue. Okay.
And the other thing is, it seems to happen as complexity, as an age complexity, tends to be a negative rather than a positive.
Ah, okay.
And what I think happens, without getting too graphic, but what I think happens is...
Please do.
in the very bridge of your nose is the epithelium of where you smell it. So it's the only part of your body where there's actually raw nerve endings, and they're covered in a thin layer of mucus. And what I believe happens, and in a study that I did, that the dry air going over that mucus changes the consistency of it and changes the way that aromas are absorbed through it, and so changes the way that you smell things. So wines that have primary fruit characters always seem better on an aircraft. So the more the primary fruit, the more the wine retains its expressive nature throughout the flight. Whereas if you've got wines that have a lot of complexity about them, a lot of age characters, they become more complicated in terms of the aromas, and the aromas tend to change more radically on an aircraft. So those are sort of really the key factors that we look at.
So if you're getting on an airplane, what you should look for is something maybe like a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc with those bright tropical notes and a high acidity that keep your mouth a little wet.
Riesling.
Or Riesling, okay.
Pinot Noir. All of those. I mean, really, New Zealand could be the wine producer for aviation for the world.
Okay.
I mean, the wines that we produce here are so perfectly designed. I mean, and that's pure accident. It's just, we live in an amazing country that has a cool climate acidity, and we have those wonderful fresh fruit characters coming through, but they work incredibly well on an aircraft. And so to me, it's no surprise that when you look at the sort of competitions that are held around the world for the best wines on an aircraft, New Zealand seems to do pretty well in those, and I'm sure that it's because of those characters that we see. Great.
So just on another fun topic that your research wasn't directly on, but what exactly happens when you drink on an airplane? Does it indeed affect you more, or is that just a myth that flight attendants tend to perpetuate so you don't get drunk on the airplane?
I've seen some very drunk people on aircraft.
Me
I have
too.
to say, and it seems to happen very quickly. And all the years I spent as a flight attendant, I think really what takes place, well, what I believe happens is that a glass of wine on the aircraft is probably worth about a glass and 2/3 on the ground. I think that's roughly about what happens. And whether it's because of one of the things that happens on an aircraft is a higher altitude means that there's a little less oxygen on an aircraft, and everybody becomes a little bit hypoxic on a long flight. So, and the effects of hypoxia are a little bit like being drunk.
Okay.
But sort of
A little
yeah, a little
disorientation.
disorientated. People have a little less oxygen in the brain. They tend to get a little bit giggly and things. But I think that what happens is that process, if you like, is sped up by alcohol. So when I fly, I always have a glass of wine from every. Sorry, a glass of wine.
This got
That probably
interesting.
don't,
Yes.
yeah. Maybe I'll put it the other way around. A glass of water with every glass of wine, but in
okay.
reality, I hope it's a glass of wine with every glass of water. But I think it's really important to drink lots and lots of water and hydrate yourself on an aircraft.
And that way you can just enjoy more wine when it comes
Well,
down
you can
to it.
enjoy more wine, and the age-old concept is always drink less wine but better wine, and that's why you get to be as old as I am, and still looking as if I'm only in my early 20s.
Is as
I mean,
spry as a spring chicken. Well, words of sage advice. Thank you so much for
a
your
pleasure,
time.
and enjoy the dinner tonight.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thanks.